on their call. There was a readout that just went out that should be in your inboxes. You may have seen, commended the work of their respective teams following the summit and welcomed the unanimous vote in the council. There was a readout, I should note, that just went out of a call that President Biden did with President Putin this morning. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But just to note for all of your inboxes. Also today, the President will sign an executive order that will direct a historic whole-of-government effort to promote competition in the American economy. This effort has three goals: lower prices for consumers, higher wages for workers, and more innovation and economic growth. Lack of competition drives up prices for consumers. Barriers to competition also drive down wages for workers. When there are only a few employers in town, workers have less opportunity to bargain for a higher wage and to demand dignity and respect. In total, higher prices and the median American household $5,000 per year. So we want to work to address that. Competition is the engine of our economy, and this is just the beginning. We'll be back in the weeks ahead to update you on the progress we're making on this executive order and the concrete benefits we are delivering to the American people. I also wanted to provide in Haiti. The United States remains engaged and in close consultations with our Haitian and international partners to support the Haitian people in the aftermath of the assassination of the president. In response to the government's request for security and investigative assistance, we will be sending senior FBI and DHS officials to Port-au-Prince as soon as possible to assess the situation and how we may be able to assist. I also wanted to note that in January 2021, we announced a 70 for a wide range of issues, including democratic governance, health, education, agricultural development, and strengthening of pre-election activities. Strengthening Haiti's law enforcement capacity is a key U.S. priority, was before the assassination a few days ago, continues to be. And the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs provides assistance directly to the Haitian National Police. We are also providing $5 million to strengthen the Haitian National Police capacity to work with communities to resist gangs. I also remind you all that earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security redesignated temporary protected status for Haiti for 18 months, something the Secretary announced in May and something we are working to implement. And finally, Haiti is one of the countries that will be receiving vaccines from the United States. We will be prepared to deliver those hopefully as early as next week. Airport and how we want to deliver these. Sorry, two other updates. One other update and the week ahead. On global vaccines, today we are sending 3 million doses to Indonesia, 1.5 million doses to Nepal, 500,000 doses to Moldova, and 500,000 doses to Bhutan. With these shipments in this week alone, we have sent nearly 15 million doses to countries including Guatemala, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Afghanistan, and Vietnam. On Indonesia, I also wanted to add that in addition to the vaccines, we're moving forward on plans to increase assistance for Indonesia's broader COVID-19 response efforts. We recognize the difficult situation Indonesia currently finds itself in, with a surge in Indonesia who are affected. Finally, let me get to the week ahead. On Monday, the President will meet with local leaders, including law enforcement, elected officials, and a community violence intervention advocate to discuss his administration's comprehensive strategy to reduce gun crimes and other violent crimes. And that's here at the White House. On Tuesday, the President will deliver remarks in Philadelphia, the birthplace of democracy, on his administration's actions to protect the sacred constitutional right to vote and the need to overcome anti-voter laws. He will make the moral case to the American people on why the right to vote is fundamental to who we are as a nation. On Thursday, the president will deliver remarks to mark the day that tens of millions of to the American Rescue Plan. The expanded child tax credit provides working families $250 each month for every child 6 to 17 years old, and $300 each month for every child under 6 years old. Also Thursday, the president will welcome and enduring bilateral ties between the United States and Germany. This forward-looking visit will address our robust partnership on shared global challenges and identify areas to further strengthen cooperation in the months and years ahead. And on Friday, the president will participate in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders Retreat, remotely, obviously, on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. On Friday afternoon, the president will travel to Camp David, where he will remain over the weekend. Alex, that was a lot of information. Hopefully, go ahead.
And we have new information about a call with President Putin. Can you tell us more about what prompted this? Was it decided in response to these recent ransomware attacks? What exactly did President Biden say? He reiterated that the United States will take any necessary action to defend its people. What threats, if any, did he make? And then I wanted to know, the top of the readout suggests that it was partly sort of a pleasant call. The leaders commended their joint work. So can you explain why President Biden was at all pleasant in this call when it seems that there are all of these ransomware attacks coming from Russia that may have been government approved?
First, let me say that the president is a believer in face-to-face diplomacy when possible and leader-to-leader diplomacy when that's not possible. And this is an example of that. And this is the first time, even though ransomware attacks have been increasing over the past 18 months, if not longer, that there has been this level of engagement at this level. And certainly the president knew, even when they met in Geneva, that there would be a need for ongoing discussions and engagements. I would say the reason that they commended the work of their teams is this is consistent with the president's view that diplomacy includes working together where there is opportunity and agreement and being clear and candid and forthright when there is disagreement. And this call is an example of that. So because of their agreement and the discussion they had in Geneva, the UN Security Council is going to extend access for humanitarian corridors, providing assistance, humanitarian assistance to people in Syria. That's something that is pivotal and that is going to save lives. That is something to be commended. At the same time, the president made clear, as I think you could see in the readout, that he underscored the need for President Putin to take action to disrupt these ransomware groups. Our evil, we know, operates in Russia and other countries around the world, and we don't have additional or new information suggesting the Russian government directed these attacks. We also know, and we also believe, that they have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to take action. And as you can see in the readout, the president also made clear that the United States will take any necessary action to defend its people and its critical infrastructure. So this was an example of leader-to-leader diplomacy, something the president feels is vital as he operates in the world.
quick note of clarification on the new CDC guidelines on schools,
Sure.
because there seems to be a lot of confusion when these come out. Schools are now supposed to allow teachers and students that are vaccinated not to wear masks, but they're not recommended to keep track of that. Is that a recommendation enforceable? And if not, why even make the recommendation to begin with? And then going forward, as we're seeing an increase in vaccinations or increase in the Delta variant in some of these under-vaccinated clusters, is there a situation in which the administration would suggest returning to virtual learning at all?
First, the CDC laid out ways several months ago that all schools can safely return to in-person learning. That applies to schools in areas where there are high levels of vaccination and areas where there are lower levels of vaccination. And thanks to the American Rescue Plan, $122 billion in funding, schools can implement these mitigation measures that they may not have been able to prior. So this guidance today reiterated that masks should be worn indoors by all unvaccinated individuals. Schools should continue to maintain at least 3 feet of physical distance. Screening, testing, ventilation, hand washing, and respiratory etiquette, staying home when sick and getting tested, contact tracing with quarantine, and isolation and cleaning and disinfection continue to be important layers of prevention to keep schools safe. Now, the guidelines, if they are not vaccinated, which obviously applies to children who are under a certain age who are not yet eligible, then there are guidelines that remain in place. How these guidelines will be implemented has always been the purview of local school districts. That has always been the case with vaccines in general, even prior to the coronavirus. So this is public health guidelines that they are providing. It is up to the school districts to apply and go ahead, Jeff.
Some 3 weeks or so ago, President Biden in Geneva said that Vladimir Putin knows there are consequences. He knows I will take action. Did he raise the volume of a similar message in their call today, or did he amplify it in any way, or did he just repeat it?
Well, I think as the readout makes clear, he reiterated that the United States will take any necessary action to defend its people and its critical infrastructure. And he also reiterated his expectation that President Putin take action, even if it is not directed by the Russian government, and if it is because of criminal actors in his own country. So I'm not going to give you a tone and tenor readout here, but the president believes that and he's always believed this was going to need to be an ongoing diplomatic engagement with the Russians. We've had expert level talks. We've had those talks focused on cyber, focused on ransomware, but he also understands that there's going to need to be talks at times at the leader level. This is exactly
you don't have any new information that Russia was involved specifically in these attacks, is that right?
Correct.
Are the cyber groups still meeting next week, the U.S. group and the Russia side meeting next week on
Yes.
cyber?
Yes, go ahead.
So in this call with President Putin, did Putin provide any assurances to President Biden that he will in fact crack down on cyber criminals that are in his country?
Well, I'm not going to read out on behalf of the Kremlin. I will let them read out their own, what the president conveyed to President Biden.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but did President Putin provide any assurances to President Biden on that call?
Again, that's not an appropriate role for the United States to convey. I can convey and read out to you what role President Biden played and what message he delivered to the Russians. Go ahead.
So you talked about the visit of Chancellor Merkel coming on Thursday. To what extent will President Biden ask Germany and other countries that are involved to stand with him in a response to Russia on these ransomware attacks? Was that a big part of your agenda?
Well, I would say that it has long been, and it was back to the foreign trip, part of his message to other European leaders and partners was we need to stand together and work together to address the threat of ransomware, cyber attacks. It is not just an issue for the United States. It is an issue for a range of countries around the globe. In terms of what percentage of the meeting, I think we'll have more as we get closer to the meeting with Chancellor Merkel, but certainly I would expect that the rising threat of cyber and ransomware would be part of the agenda.
One more on Germany and then another quick one. So on Germany, you know, this one residual issue that is still to be addressed has to do with Nord Stream. To what extent are you hopeful that you might be able to reach some kind of an agreement or extract some kind of promises from Germany that would stave off the need to have those sanctions take place?
Well, it certainly will be a part of the discussion, and the President's, our view continues to be that it's a bad deal and one that has global issues involved in it, but I'm not the outcome of the meeting will look like. Yeah.
Real quick on Haiti.
Yeah.
So we have some reporting that there's investigation going on about the role that Haitian Americans may have played in that attack. Can you say a few words about your understanding of that? I understand you're sending to the FBI and DHS, and it may be a bit premature, but any readout now would be helpful.
I don't have anything to update in that regard. Obviously, the investigation is being led by Haitian police forces on the grounds. There have been some reports, I think you're referencing, but I don't have any update beyond that.
Would that be a serious concern for the White House if you found that there were, in fact, American citizens involved in this assassination?
Well, certainly, but I'm not going to get ahead of where the investigation is going. It's ongoing. It's led by the Haitians on the ground. Go ahead, Kelly.
Did the president, in his conversation with President Putin, expand on the list that he presented to him in Geneva about the types of critical infrastructure and parts of the U.S. economy that were off limits? Has the increase in ransomware informed his view on that to expand that? And should we interpret this call and the implicit warning in there again as a sign that the U.S. will act and act soon?
Well, first I would say that, as you noted, the President did provide a list of critical infrastructure when he met with President Putin just a few weeks ago. He did that because, of course, an attack on critical infrastructure that would take out a swath of the American economy. He did not provide that list to say if the attack is not on critical infrastructure, we're not going to take action. That was not the restriction he gave himself. And I think in this call today, he was making clear that, again, reiterating again, that attacks by criminal groups, by actors that may not be directed by the Russian government, you still have a responsibility. Of actions, he made clear that he's going to take steps to defend the American people and our own infrastructure and our interests here in the United States. So while we're not going to preview operationally what that looks like or what he may decide to do, he did make clear that he reserves that option to take action.
And do you think the President's intent in having this call and on this topic within the call was to send that signal that action could be imminent?
I think his intent was to make clear and reiterate again that attacks by criminal groups, ransomware attacks by criminal groups on entities in the United States is not acceptable, and that we reserve the right to take action. Go ahead, Misha.
Thank you. Did President Biden specifically ask about Casilla and the RNC hack in this phone call? And did Putin say he was investigating? Did he deny it? What was that conversation?
Well, I'm still not going to read out what President Putin said, and I'm sure that the Kremlin will do their own readout of what he conveyed. I can tell you broadly that, of course, the ransomware attack that happened over the course of last weekend was a big focus, of course, of the call, which was clear in the readout that we provided. Again, I would reiterate on the RNC attack that the information we have to date is that that was on a third-party entity, and it's something the FBI is working with them on. We don't have additional information beyond that at this point in time.
Did the president express when he would take this action?
I'm just not going to have more to read out for you on operational details or
Does play any role in crafting the sales agreement with the New York Gallery to protect the purchasers or
that allows for Hunter Biden to work in his profession within reasonable safeguards. Of course, he has the right to pursue an artistic career, just like any child of a president has the right to pursue a career, but all interactions regarding the selling of art and the setting of prices will be handled by a professional gallerist adhering to the highest industry standards, and any offer out of the normal course would be rejected out of hand, and the gallerist will not share information about buyers or prospective buyers, including their identities with Hunter Biden or the administration, which provides quite a level of protection and transparency.
the gallery owner is a private citizen who might not be privy to who might have some interests in purchasing this artwork. Is the White House doing anything to work with the owner to make sure there's not impropriety there when it is ultimately sold?
Well, I think it would be challenging for a person who we don't know and Hunter Biden doesn't know to have influence. So that's a protection. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. On this call this morning with the Russian president, did President Biden discuss at all the Taliban delegation that was in Moscow yesterday?
The focus of the call and the conversation, which I can tell you was about an hour long, was really primarily on these two topics. I can see if there was anything in addition that was raised, and I can follow up with you after the briefing.
And then on the Afghan translators, does the president believe he has any executive authority to determine where these Afghan nationals await their visas? I know that the president said yesterday you guys are working closely with Congress. Want to know what that looks like. But in addition, does he have any influence on where they wait out this time period for their visas as he symbolized with immigrants at the southern border by ending the Remain in Mexico policy?
Well, it's a different program, obviously, which I know you're conveying. And what we are trying to determine is U.S. facilities and bases that are located in different parts of the world where we can house these brave and courageous individuals while their processing continues. So that's what we're determining. We have not made a final determination of that. I would see it as a different type of a program, and but those are the considerations, and it's already law. So we are in a position where we can make a decision to relocate individuals from Afghanistan to these third-party countries.
And then on the vaccine, Pfizer requesting approval for a third shot from regulators. CDC, FDA said at this time you don't need a booster to be considered vaccinated. But what's the timeline that you guys are looking at on when that would be recommended, especially as it pertains to meeting vaccination requirements to forego things like masks? Well,
first, and you referenced this, but just for others, the CDC and the FDA put out a pretty clear statement last night after the announcement by Pfizer, making clear that Americans who have been fully vaccinated do not need a booster shot at this time. I'd also note that they are constantly engaged in a rigorous process to consider when a booster might be necessary and by the science. But at this time, that is not a determination that they have made, and we wanted to make clear that that is not something that the American people need to plan for at this moment.
Jen.
Go ahead. I'm just going to jump around because I haven't gotten to a bunch of people in this room in a couple of days. Go ahead.
Jen, a couple in Afghanistan. This community had assessed that the
the Afghan government to collapse. That conflicts with the reporting of the Journal and other news outlets that said that he collapsed within 6 months. Was he not briefed on that intelligence, or are you denying that that intelligence exists at all?
Well, first I would say that we, of course, abide by the intelligence presented by our own intelligence community. But the way the question was answered and in part presented was whether it was inevitable. And the president does not believe that it is inevitable. The intelligence community has never said it was inevitable for the Taliban to take over the country. And so his objective, or his what he was trying to convey, was that there's a responsibility, and the responsibility now lies in the hands of the Afghans. We have we've trained over 300,000. We've provided $3.9 billion in humanitarian assistance. These are brave fighters who have fought off, taken on casualties, and fought off over the course of the last several years. Any intelligence assessment predicted it was inevitable.
And just one more. Yesterday, he also said that the U.S. doesn't bear responsibility for any deaths that might occur after the U.S. withdraws. Can you explain, how the U.S. doesn't bear any responsibility for that?
Well, I think what the president was conveying is that we are doing everything we can to equip, train, empower the Afghan National Security Forces. And we're going to continue to remain engaged, not just through the end of August, but then forward. But it is going to be up to them it is ultimately their job and responsibility now to demonstrate their capabilities and their will to defend their country. And that was what he was attempting to convey yesterday.
Just really briefly on the competition executive order, was there any discussion about trying to accomplish those goals through legislation? And would that be the president's preferred approach over an executive order that could be overturned by his successor?
Well, there's certainly value in legislation. It makes it more permanent, so there's no question about that. But the president is going to continue to use authorities that every president before him has had. Executive actions, which allow him to take actions to make industries more competitive, to bring relief to consumers and the American people. So